Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is invent. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear invent used is to mean to create or design something that has not existed before. In one of my recent classes, I had a student ask if the verbs make and invent were really the same thing. And there is an important difference to this. And that piece is the has not existed before. So it's the first time that something is being made or created. Okay? A second way you might hear the verb invent used is to mean to make up some idea, maybe a name, or even a story, especially if it's done to trick someone. Okay. Now, in the past, I've had teachers talk to me and sometimes share their frustrations with students not doing homework or not turning things in on time. And I've heard other teachers say, "Ah, my students invent reasons or invent excuses for being late or for not doing something." So the idea with that kind of sentence or statement is that the student is making something up with it not really being true. And it might be done to make the teacher not be mad, right? But it does go to kind of a word we talked about in a previous video within the last couple of weeks, deceive, where you make someone believe something that is not true. Now, you should know that invent is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to form inventing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, invent, ends with a T sound. This means that the ed ending is going to add an extra syllable to the word. We're going to make the sound id. So the past tense and the participle forms of the verb should sound like this: invented, invented. Now, you might be very happy to know there are no additional phrasal verbs that we need to study. So instead, we can focus our practice today on making some sentences in two different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the simple past tense and the simple present. We'll start with the past tense. We use this to talk about completed actions that occur at a known point in the past. Sometimes there are time signals. It could be a word like yesterday. It could be a phrase like 3 weeks ago that are telling us when a particular action occurred. But not every sentence in the simple past tense will have one of those time signals. Sometimes it's implied as part of a conversation. Right? If we're talking about yesterday, we don't keep repeating that word yesterday. We're going to understand, yeah, this is our topic or this is our subject. It can also be implied as part of a longer text. The nice thing about making simple past tense sentences is that our structure is going to stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we're going to start with our subject, and then we're going to have the ed form of our verb because this is a regular verb. You can see that in my example sentence here. A middle school student invented a fire detection device that works faster than most smoke detectors. Okay. I borrowed this sentence from some recent news articles. This is a true thing. So this person, this student, has created some device that can tell that there is a fire faster than smoke detectors, which are probably the most commonly thing used. Okay? Now let's talk about making negative simple past tense sentences. To do this, we are going to have our subject, we're going to have did not, and then we're going to have the base verb. You might also hear the contraction didn't, and then the base verb. But notice I'm not using the ed form of my verb in the negative. I go back to the base verb with no special endings. You can see that in my example sentence. It's a common belief, but Abner Doubleday didn't invent the sport of baseball. Okay? I think there are many sort of common beliefs in history about who the first person was to create something, and many times we have it wrong. And this is an example of that. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, you start with did, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. So again, notice we're not using the ed form of our verb here. Okay, we're only using that ed in the affirmative or the positive. An example of a yes or no question in the simple past tense might be, did they invent a TikTok trend? Right? Did they make something up new that now many people are mimicking or trying to recreate? Now let's move on and talk about the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about habits and routines. You might hear it used to discuss customs or other actions that repeat again and again at some known frequency. We also use the simple present to talk about facts. When we go to make simple simple present tense sentences, we have to pay attention to our subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm just going to use the base verb. No endings, no suffixes on the end of that verb. Okay? But if the subject is he, she, or it, then we're going to add an S to the end of the verb here. You can see that in my example sentence. She always invents excuses for not participating. Okay? So here, maybe we're talking about somebody who always seems to be making something up so that she does not have to participate in a particular activity. Maybe it's a class, who knows? Okay? But let's move on and talk about making negative simple present sentences. To do this, again, I'm going to pay attention to my subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, I'm going to use do, not, and then the base verb. You might also hear the contraction don't, and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use does not, and then the base verb. So again, notice I am not adding an S to the end of the verb in the negative. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Architects don't invent anything, but they transform reality. Okay? I borrowed this sentence from an article. I think it was trying to get people interested in jobs as architects. Right? And what they're saying is it's not necessarily the architect's job to create and make something new, but they can take someone's ideas and turn them into real structures, real buildings. Lastly, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, I'm going to start with do or does. Whichever form matches my subject, that subject comes next. Then you're going to see the base verb. Again, in my yes or no questions, I am not using S on the end of my verb in any form. So an example of a yes or no question in the simple present might be, does the company invent new technology? And to that question, right, we might say, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb invent. And today's first word we're going to discuss is the noun invention. Invention. This is the action of inventing something. Many times we're describing some type of process, maybe a device, an object. An example of this might be, some say the printing press was the greatest invention in history. Now, it feels funny making that sentence when I'm making videos that are being posted and shared with people around the world, but the argument for the printing press being kind of the best is that it allowed more and more people to learn to read. Before the printing press, it was very expensive to have your own copy of anything that was written. So, the printing press led to higher literacy all over the world. Let's take another word. The next word is the noun inventor. You see that OR suffix? That's going to tell us it's a person who maybe has invented some type of process or a device. It could even be a person whose job it is to constantly create new things. An example of this might be Marie Van Brinton Brown was an inventor who created the video home security system. Okay. Let's move on to another word. It's the adjective inventive. When this gets used, there are a couple meanings it could have. One would be to describe someone or something that shows creativity or shows original ideas. So ideas that are not like everyone else. An example of this might be, we need some inventive solutions, right? Maybe something that we haven't thought of, something we haven't done, or even something that hasn't existed. A second way to use the adjective inventive is to usually describe someone that has the ability to create or design new things, or again, think originally. An example of this might be, she is an inventive musician. Feel like we hear this adjective used to describe a lot of artists who are doing original things that don't always look like or sound like someone else. The last word we're going to discuss today is the adverb inventively. That ly is telling me it's an adverb. And this means that something is being done in a way that shows new and original ideas. Remember, adverbs can describe verbs, but they can also describe adjectives. You're going to see that as an example here in this sentence. This is an inventively designed photo book. So inventively there is describing how it was designed. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.